Welcome to Spells and Spoilers, the podcast where we dive into all things supernatural. This season, we're starting with Charmed, so grab your spellbook and your popcorn, and let's get magical. Welcome to Spells and Spoilers, a rewatch and reread podcast. I'm Aleacia.
And I'm Elizabeth. This season, we'll go minute by minute through every episode of Charmed, giving you all the details and diving into the magic, the drama, and everything in between.
That's right. Each week we're going to break down one episode of Charmed, and today we're recapping Season 1, Episode 10, Wicca Envy.
But before we get started, just a quick reminder to follow us on social media, subscribe to the podcast, and leave a review if you're enjoying our deep dive.
So, what did you think of the episode title?
I did not like it. It didn't make sense to me.
I don't think it
did not go. It didn't go with it at all. Yeah.
Like, envying what?
I mean, I get, like, you know, the villains, Rex and Hannah.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to spoil that right there. Like, wanting their powers, but that's kind of the purpose of all the villains. Yeah. So I didn't really feel like it went well at all.
Yeah, I agree. Well, we start the episode with the girls coming into the manor. It's Prue and Phoebe, and they're carrying like a ton of shopping bags. Prue is saying, I don't know, Phoebe, the Betsy Johnson dress may be a little too much for work. And I don't know if you've like seen Betsy Johnson's designs, but they're like very colorful and like over the top. And I'm like, I need to see this dress. We sell a lot of Betsy Johnson at the store, like bags and towels and stuff. And so I'm like, I need to see this dress that Betsy Johnson made that is over the top.
Okay.
And I need to see Prue wearing it immediately.
Because she is not a bright person.
No.
Like colorful wise.
Right.
Like, she's definitely more neutral.
Yeah. Phoebe tells her that that's what the new wardrobe is all about. It's about pushing the limits. I need to see this dress once again. And Prue says, yeah, and stretching the budget. Maybe I should just check with Piper. And they hear Piper laughing, and then Piper and Leo run into the foyer, and Piper is like, you know, like a button up and socks, like clearly about to get it on. But Piper sees them, and she freezes Leo and then trips over him and slides across the floor and lands at Prue and Phoebe's feet.
It was definitely a good first base slide.
Yes. They help her up, and Piper says that she's so embarrassed. Phoebe says, of course, she might have other things on her mind, like having her way with the handyman. Piper says, I thought you guys were supposed to be shopping. And then Phoebe notices that Piper's shirt is unbuttoned, and she says, oh, look, front class bra. She means business.
Which I want to point out that was not a front class bra. Like, I did not see where there was the clasp.
Yeah.
I froze it to check because when it comes to fashion, I'm very detailed on that. And I was like, wait a minute, I got to rewind. And I did not see a clasp.
Piper says, do you mind? And Phoebe says, no, are you kidding? I think it's great, as long as he's not still on the clock.
Because, you know, that's a little wrong for employment.
Yeah. Piper says, that's what I mean. You guys have to get out of here before he unfreezes. I never know how long this thing lasts. How much did you guys spend? And, like, mentioning how the unfreezing works, I realized, like, while I'm watching the scene, the freezing time was so long. Like,
it was compared to normal.
A long time.
Yeah. And when we went and seen Holly Marie Combs, she had mentioned that when the freezing happens, they are completely still. Like, they're actually in that position for that long.
Yeah. But it was a very long time.
Yes.
Like, way longer than usual.
Mm-hmm. So maybe her powers are getting stronger then.
Yes. But Phoebe says they spent lots because Prue's new look is perfect for an SHW. Prue questions that, and Phoebe says, a single hot witch.
Which I loved.
Piper asks if Prue's sure that it isn't depression buying, like post-breakup retail therapy. And Phoebe grabs some like a red corset out of the bag and says, does this look like something a depressed woman would wear?
It was very spicy.
Yeah.
Very spicy.
Prue tells Piper that maybe she should borrow it. And Piper says, okay, time's up. You two gotta go. And she pushes them into the living room. She says, go in there, be quiet. And Phoebe quips, we will if you will. Piper walks over to Leo and like stands where she was standing and then like grabs his hand. He unfreezes and they run up the stairs like nothing had happened. We time lapse a little bit into Prue's room. Kit is there. Prue walks in. She is unzipping her sweater, and we see Rex like astral project next to Prue.
Mm-hmm.
Kit can see him, so she growls and hisses at him, but Prue can't see anything. Rex says, "You forgot to unpack your briefcase when you got home from work. You want to do it right now." And we see Prue do that. He says, "What you're about to pick up is a tiara, but you really believe it's your date book." And then we see the tiara that was in her bag transform into the date book, and she picks it up. And he says, "Now put it back in your desk like you always do. Excellent. Now you want to continue getting ready for bed." Prue starts undressing. Kit jumps up on the desk and hisses at Rex again, and then Rex goes back into his body. After that, we cut to Rex's office. Hannah asks how it went. And Rex says, "Prue did exactly as I told her. You know, I rather like this new power." Hannah asks if he's sure that Prue didn't see him. And Rex says, "No, she didn't see me. I was invisible." I love this, like, moment where they just tell you what his power is and, like, give you, like, a very, very much like a tell instead of show. Like, we just saw everything and then they, like, explain it to us like we didn't see anything. So Hannah asks, "How did you get there?" And Rex says, "I've explained this to you, Hannah. It's called astral projection. With it, I can transport myself physically and implant a subliminal thought into Prue's brain, just like I did when I tricked her into leaving the vault today with the tiara. See, I planted the thought and made her think she came out empty-handed." Hannah says, "I still don't understand how it works." So, like, thank you so much for that, like, encyclopedia definition of your power. And, like, we didn't just see it.
Well, not only that, but, like, I felt she was extremely naive because he explained it very well on how it worked. And then she's just like, "Oh, I still don't understand it."
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense. Like, I felt she was very naive on this.
Yeah. He says, "Watch." And then he walks across the room and he astral projects over to Hannah and says, "You want to disrobe for him desperately." And then she's like stands up and like starts to do that. And he goes, "Understand now?" And I was watching that and I was like, that's kind of rapey. Don't do that.
I mean, you're not wrong. Very much so. But she's also very willing, you can tell.
Yeah, but
still. I could totally see that.
But after that, we cut to credits. An interesting location to cut to credits. I do think that the opening scene was very good, though.
Yeah, because it went right into it. Mm-hmm. And then it made you want more. Like, what is happening?
Yeah, I do like that we're finally openly calling Rex and Hannah the bad guy.
Yeah.
And, like, finally getting to, like, part of their plan. Mm-hmm. I'm appreciative of that. Like, let's move it along.
Yeah.
So the next morning, we are in Prue's room, and she is doing, like, a montage of trying on all her clothes. She tries on, like, outfit after outfit. She, like, uses her powers to, like, slide her shoes over and tries on different pairs of shoes. It's very cute.
Yes.
She finally picks out an outfit, which was funny to me because it's like a black dress with a gray blazer. Like,
yeah, very, very Prue.
Yeah. But very I was Prue. Like, this is something she would have already owned. This is not something new and exciting.
So it was new to her and exciting to her.
But she goes downstairs and Phoebe is at the bottom of the stairs. She's wearing a suit. And she asks, "If you ran an employment agency, wouldn't you want me?" Prue says, "Maybe, but I definitely want my suit back." Phoebe says, "No, this is part of your old wardrobe. I'm just recycling." Prue tells her that the environment thanks her, and Phoebe says, "But take it off. I know." Piper starts coming down the stairs. She says, "Hi, bye." And Prue says, "Piper, didn't you have to go in early this morning?" Piper says, like, kind of embarrassed that was the plan, but she's running a little late. Just took a little longer to get out of bed this morning than I planned. Okay, bye.
I love her awkwardness.
Yeah.
I love it.
The sisters tell her to wait, and they stand in her way, and Phoebe says, "Whoa, whoa, whoa. You and Leo, last night, dish." Piper says, "It was nice. It was wonderful. We just had a few problems." Phoebe asks, "What problems?" And Piper says, "Well, it's been a while, you know, and I was a little nervous and I kind of kept freezing him. She says, I didn't mean to the first time.
Could you imagine having that power? Like, come on, sisters. We know.
Yeah. Prue says, so, at what point exactly in the process did you freeze him? The Piper like kind of avoids the question. She says, I gotta go. And she like goes to walk around them and head to the door. And Prue says, no, Piper, we're only teasing you. And Phoebe says, the truth is we're just jealous. Prue says, seriously, we're happy to see you with a great guy finally. And Phoebe tells her that between you and Leo, Prue and the new hot Wicca woman, and her soon to be employed, things are really looking up. Piper says, don't say that. The moment someone says that, everything always goes south. And Phoebe says, unless you freeze him. She says, oh, I couldn't help it. It was so good. Prue says, okay, come on. If you're going to borrow the car, let's go. And Leo comes down the stairs. He greets them. He says, good morning. And Phoebe says, yeah, we heard.
Like, it was very obvious.
Yes.
Where he came from.
Yeah. Prue tells them bye, and Phoebe says to have a magical day, and they all leave. Leo asks what she meant by that, and Piper says, who knows? I'm late for work. Bye. She kisses him on the cheek. She goes to leave, but Leo grabs her around the waist and pulls her back and kisses her and says goodbye. We cut to Buckland's. Prue and Phoebe walk in, and there are cops everywhere. Prue asks a maintenance guy or a security guy. I think it's security, maybe.
Security.
Yeah. His name is Jaime. What happened? He says that they got robbed last night, and she asks what was stolen. He says it was the Romanov tiara. Prue says, oh my god, not the tiara, because it's like $1 bajillion.
Yeah, lots and lots of money.
Yeah. And Rex walks up to them. He says hello. Prue says that Jaime had just told her what had happened. He greets Phoebe, which I thought was, I don't understand like this whole him flirting with Phoebe thing. I don't really understand the point.
I think it was just part of his game because he had met her, a couple of episodes ago, and I think that was one of his ploys. Like, I'm gonna go after her.
It was very, I don't know. It seemed like kind of out of left field to me, but. Phoebe apologizes for what happened, and Rex says, me too. A loss of this magnitude could severely damage our reputation. Who is going to consign with anything with us if... Prue says, no, we just have to get the tiara back before word gets out. Rex agrees and says, will you take point on this then? Help the police? You're really the only one that I can trust. Sus. Prue asks, what about him? And Rex says, unfortunately, I've got another commitment tonight. It's really something I can't get out of. Some good friends are giving a concert, and I promised I wouldn't miss it. Phoebe asks who, and he says it's the Verve.
Which I don't get how he's like making such a big deal about this tiara. But then he's like, oh, well, I'm too busy to take care of it and handle it. I need to go to this concert instead.
Yeah, and I'm literally the owner, so it's all on me.
Exactly.
It's not found.
Like your friends are clearly going to understand that this is a big deal for you.
Yeah. Rex asks if she knows the band, and Phoebe says, know them, I worship them. Bittersweet Symphony is like the best song ever. Rex says, really? I have an idea. Why don't you join me tonight? I'm sure I can rustle up another ticket. And Prue makes a face. She's like, absolutely, please do not do that. Rex notices the face that she made and says, well, you wouldn't mind, would you, Prue?
He caught on big time.
Yeah. She says, of course not. Why would I mind? And Rex says, then it's a date. Well, figuratively speaking, of course. Prue says, yeah, of course. Rex tells Phoebe that he'll pick her up at 7. And Phoebe says, oh, look at the time. Gotta get going. I promise I'll have the car back by noon. Rex thanks Prue for pitching in, and then they leave, and Andy walks around the corner. Prue asks Andy if he is on the case, and Andy says, yep, guess fate keeps throwing us together. Isn't Andy on homicide?
You have a point there.
So
maybe because it's such a big deal, they rang him in.
I'm like,
but you do have a point there. I didn't catch that.
Yeah. Maybe it's like he's in major crimes or something.
Not because in the last episode, There was no, when he showed up, there was no murder either.
Yeah,
When
what
the
is
guy
your
jumped out of the
department?
window.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he's a detective, so maybe he's just in general.
Yeah. But usually they like are assigned to departments and they have like specialties.
Yes.
So maybe I don't know.
I don't know. Maybe in the 90s there was not like a homicide unit.
I'm sure there was.
Probably. I don't know.
But maybe he's like a major crimes detective. Maybe he's like higher up.
Yeah.
He's an inspector. There was a person detected in your
That's probably one of the kids. Poor Teddy just got
home. Andy says, "Yep, guess fate keeps throwing us together." Hannah walks up and asks if they know each other. She says, "I forgot." Prue says, "No, you didn't."
I know. I love how she called her out.
Hannah says, "Well, I suggested that the inspector speak with you since you were the last one to actually see the tiara. But if you need anything else, please don't hesitate to call."
That was definitely a jab at her.
Yeah.
Like, you were the last one.
Yeah.
So what'd you do with it?
Really. Morris walks up and says, "We'd like to see the security tapes from last night as soon as possible." Hannah tells him that Prue can arrange that, and she leaves with Morris. Prue asks Andy how he's doing, and Andy says, "Okay, it'd be better if you stopped by the station later on so we could talk about this. At 1 o'clock?" And Prue agrees, and then we cut into Rex's office with Rex and Hannah. Hannah is saying, "I can't believe that you're taking that little witch to the concert. That was my ticket."
I'd be upset too.
Yeah, same. Rex says, "Hannah, kitten." And he like purrs at her.
He does. It was very awkward.
Yeah. He says, "You know I'm only doing it to upset Prue. All the better to frame her and force the sisters to relinquish their powers." Hannah says, "How do you even know that they can?" And Rex tells her that they have a special spell in the Book of Shadows. How does he know that?
So I'm thinking, because how did he know that Phoebe liked that band?
Yeah.
So I'm thinking that maybe he had been astral projecting this whole time, and they're just now showing us that he's been doing that.
Interesting. But he says when the time comes, they'll use it and to trust him. At the police station, we're with Prue and Andy. Andy is saying, "You said you'd put the tiara back in the vault before you left. Was anybody else there?" Prue says, "The security guard, Jaime." He asks if he locked the vault, and Prue says that she did. Andy says, "Okay, did you happen to take anything out of the vault when you left?" Prue says, "No. Is this an interview or an interrogation?" Andy apologizes and says he's just trying to get all the facts. Morris walks up and says, "The problem is there's no signs of forced entry into the auction house or the vault." Prue says, "So you think one of the employees might have stolen it?" Morris agrees. He says that's a really strong possibility. And Prue says, "Someone like me?" Andy says, "Don't be ridiculous. We don't think that."
Yeah, he's defending her very much so.
Yeah. Morris says, "Still, we have to check out everyone's story. Grand larceny is big time. Could cost a person 15, 20 years easily." Andy tells her that he thinks that they have enough for now, but if they have any other questions, they'll give her a call. Prue says, "Well, you know where to reach me." And she walks away, and Andy says, "I think I still remember." Then he turns to Morris and says, "What was that all about?" Morris says, "You tell me. Last time you were ready to bust her for stealing a feather. Now you think she's Miss Innocent?" And he says, that was a whole different situation. Completely unrelated.
He was caught up in his feels, that last one.
Yeah. He was like, okay, like, do you really think she stole $1 million tiara? Really? No, probably not. Morris says, "Look, I'm not saying she did it, all right? But you have to admit, a lot of the arrows are pointing in her direction. There's also this, and the security tapes that Prue brought over. One's missing, the one from the vault." We cut into Quake at the bar. Piper is counting the money at the cash register, and Prue comes up and says, "You're glowing. Your face, total afterglow." Piper says, "It is not. It's just warm in here."
I've never understood that saying. I don't know. Maybe I've never had a glow.
Piper asks how much the tiara was worth, and Prue says, "Well, I didn't get a chance to have it appraised. We just got it in yesterday. But I would say well over $1 million. Piper asks if they have any idea who stole it, and Prue says, "Yeah, me." Piper is confused, and Phoebe and Rex show up. Phoebe asks what's on the dessert menu, and Piper asks her how the concert was. She said it was the best, amazing. Prue says, still recycling, I see, because Phoebe is wearing her clothes. Rex says, thanks for taking care of things tonight, Prue. I really appreciate it. Phoebe says, don't you just love that accent? As a reminder, Rex is British. And Rex says, by the way, how did it go with the police? Prue tells him that they think it's an inside job. Rex says, do they? How disturbing.
He's the owner. They would have told him this.
Yes. Phoebe says, okay, shop talk later. We're going to grab a table, okay? Piper tells them to take the one by the window and they'll send Cindy over. Rex tells Prue that they can totally join her. And Prue says, no thanks. I think I'll pass. Prue has no problem setting the boundaries, honestly. Rex and Phoebe leave to go to the table, and Piper tells Prue that Phoebe is a big girl. Prue asks what that means, and Piper says he's rich, he's stable, he's handsome. You should be happy for her. Prue says, I'm thrilled. Piper asks if she's jealous, and Prue denies it. She says she's more like territorial. She just wants to keep her work world separate from her home world,
which is very fair.
Yes. And Piper says, good luck. We cut into the manor living room. Prue and Piper sitting on the couch. Piper's on the phone. Prue is reading the paper. Yeah. Prue is reading the paper. Phoebe comes downstairs and says, good morning. Wow, roses. Who are they for? Prue says, guess. Piper says, Leo, I need to call you back. Something's about to come up. I'll see you later. Okay, bye. It just made me laugh that she was like, something's about to happen. Yeah. Gotta go. Phoebe reads the card and it says, thank you for a lovely evening. The job is on its way, Rex. And she says, oh, what a sweetheart. Wait, who opened the box? Piper says that she can't get over how beautiful the roses are. Can you, Prue? Prue says, it must have been quite a night, after the concert. Piper's like, okay, bye. I'm going to put these in some water. And she goes into the kitchen.
Prue is kind of fishing right there. What else happened for you to get those flowers? But at the same time, he was just being a gentleman.
Yes. It was very sweet. Mm-hmm. I think we should go back to sending flowers after a date.
It would be nice.
That
yes.
would be very romantic.
Mm-hmm.
I miss it. I miss the old days that I have never had.
I have never had those days either, where I would have a date and then flowers. Of course, I have my high school sweetheart too, so he was young and didn't know that stuff. I guess.
He needs to step it up. He needs to get it.
They both do.
Facts. Phoebe says that all she did was tell Rex that she was going to the employment agency. He said he'd make a few calls and help me out. What's the big problem? Prue says, Phoebe, really, it's none of my business. It's just watch what you say to him, okay? Because there are certain things I don't want my boss to know about me. The doorbell rings and Prue walks into the foyer to open the door, and it's Andy and Morris. She asks Andy what he's doing there, and he says, we're here to search your house for the tiara. We have a search warrant. And then he holds up the warrant and they walk inside. In Prue's room, everybody is in there. The whole crew. Phoebe says, wait, how can you guys even think that Prue would stole the tiara? And he says, we don't, Phoebe, not necessarily. Then why'd you get a search warrant?
Maybe it was just protocol.
Literally. Andy and Morris are looking in the drawers, and Phoebe says, well, then what are you doing here? Spring cleaning? Morris asks if they have any idea where the vault security camera tape is. Prue tells them that she gave them the tapes. Morris says, not that one. Andy confirms that it was not there. He opens a drawer, and Piper notices that the tiara is in there. So she freezes the room, and Prue asks, why did you do that? And Piper runs over and grabs the tiara and says, this is why. There's a tiara in here. Prue says, wait a second. That's not possible. How did that get in there? Prue's like, I don't know. Or Piper's like, I don't know, but you better come up with an answer quick before they unfreeze. Phoebe suggests that somebody had planted it there. Piper asks who? Somebody's been in our house? Rex astral projects into the room as Prue is saying, it doesn't matter. Just let them find it. I've got nothing to hide. I'm innocent. Phoebe says, well, that doesn't look very innocent. Piper, go hide it. Piper hides it under a pillow on the bed. The dumbest place to hide it, personally. What a random...
why not, like, put it behind your back in your pants behind your shirt. Like, under your shirt.
Yeah. Like,
You
maybe
know?
just put some effort in.
Yes. Be creative.
Yes. Andy and Morris unfreeze, and Rex says to Andy, "You think you should check under the pillows." So Andy directs Morris to do just that. Piper freezes them again and gets the tiara, and Piper says, "How did he know to look there?" Phoebe suggests they put it in the dresser because he's already looked in the dresser. So she puts it back, and Andy and Morris unfreeze again. Rex tells Andy to look in the dresser again, so he walks over to the dresser. Piper freezes them again. Rex walks behind Piper and says, "This is getting ridiculous." So Piper says, "This is getting ridiculous." Prue says, "No, eerie, more like it." Phoebe takes the tiara out of the dresser and says, "I'll be right back." She runs out of the room, and Piper says, "Don't worry, I'll just keep freezing them until they give up." Piper says, Rex tells Piper that she's a miserable witch. And Piper, like, makes a funny face. Prue asks her what's the matter, and Piper says, "I don't know, but I feel like calling a shrink for some reason."
I thought that was pretty funny. That was a good little twist there.
I laughed so hard. That was so funny. Phoebe comes back and says, "I put it in and Andy and Morris unfreeze," and so she whispers to Prue that she put it in the attic. And then Rex disappears. Andy says, "Nothing. I think that's good enough for now, Morris. I'm sorry about all this, Prue. I really am." Prue says that she knows, and Morris tells Andy to leave, and they go. We cut into Rex's office. He goes back into his body and says, "Witches." And he knocks something off of his desk. Hannah asks if the police found the tiara. Rex tells her that what happened, so Piper just kept freezing them and then moving it. Hannah asks how they're supposed to frame her if they can't find the evidence. And Rex tells them that they're going to have to up the stakes. We cut into the manor living room. All three of the sisters are there. And Prue is saying, "Somebody obviously is trying to set me up, and they're using magic to do it." Piper asks who, and also how. Phoebe says, "Pick a warlock, any warlock," as if they know them, like, by name.
Yeah, because they blend in.
Yeah.
They look like normal people.
Yeah. Leo comes in and asks what the police were doing there. Piper says, "Oh, nothing much, really." He asks if it's all right if he goes upstairs to fix the bathroom sink. And they say that it's fine, so he leaves. Phoebe asks if anyone thinks that Leo is a warlock. And Piper asks, why is it always somebody that she's dating that gets accused of being that?
And it's a fair question, though.
Yeah. She says, "Don't answer that." And then the phone rings, and she says, "Answer that. It's safer." So Prue answers the phone, and it's Rex. She says, "I'm on my way in." "Of course. Hold on." And she holds it out to Phoebe and says, "It's for you."
He's definitely trying to divide them.
Yeah. So he takes the phone from Prue. She takes the phone from Prue, and Phoebe says, "Hello? Yes, I got the flowers, and they're beautiful. That was so sweet of you. They made quite an impression over here, too." "A dinner party? Yes, I'd love to. Hold on, let me get a pen." And she walks out to find the pen. Piper asks Prue what she's going to do, and Prue says, "What can I do? My sister's dating my boss. I don't really have a..." And Piper says, "I mean about who's setting you up. Why don't you focus?"
Clearly, she has an issue with Phoebe and Rex.
Yeah. She asks if she has any idea who it could be. And now Tanner's at Domino's. Why are they both going to Domino's?
So we have it marked. Life 360 is marked at Domino's, so then I know when he leaves and arrives safely. And then we also have it for the high school. So then when Axton or Tanner leave, then I know that they will arrive home safely. It was at the junior high as well, because Axton walked home. So then I knew when he left and when he should be home. So then I'm notified. I was like, why are they both going to Domino's? Get out of Domino's. So Tanner works at Domino's. Oh. That's why. You're going to have to cut that out now. Yeah, but that's so funny. Okay. So now you know. Yeah, we'll not tell everybody where your child works. How about that? Right. And then when someone gets home, it notifies someone's in the driveway or someone's at your front door. So yeah. That's funny. Prue says it's got to be someone at the auction house. And if I had to guess, I would start with the person who said they were out to destroy me. Piper says, "Hannah?" And Prue tells her that she's a smart girl. And finally, we're catching on. Yes. There have been so many clues. Yes, yes. In the attic, Leo is walking in. He puts his toolbox down, closes the door. He holds out his hand, and like all the chests open. So Leo clearly has magical powers. Yes, he does.
He walks over and looks in them and then uses his powers again to close them. And then he opens a drawer with the wave of his hand. He hears footsteps, so he quickly closes the drawer as Piper walks in. Piper asks what he's doing because she thought he was going to go fix the sink.
Sus.
Yeah. And I think she was a little suspicious.
100%.
The way that she was like talking to her, like body language, was
Yes,
very
like,
suspicious.
and her facial expressions was like, oh, explain yourself, please.
Yeah. He says, I am. I just needed to fix a light downstairs, and I was hoping there would be some old fixtures up here that I could cannibalize. Listen, there's something I need to tell you, something I don't think you're gonna like. I might have to leave here soon. I might have to go back home. Piper asks if home is far away, and he says it's pretty far. I don't know for sure yet, but, I just wanted you to know, just in case. And Piper says thanks, and Leo says, I better get to work, and he kisses her on the cheeks and leaves. And I just feel like she was like, no, I don't. Not into it.
She wasn't feeling it.
Yeah.
Like, again, I feel like she was suspicious.
Yeah.
And
yeah. Well, she notices a drawer open slightly, and she walks over to it and sees that that's the one that had the tiara in it.
Yeah, so that made me think that she definitely was suspicious of him, because why would it be open when clearly it should have been closed because they were trying to hide it?
Right. Yeah. We cut into Rex's apartment. Phoebe rings the doorbell. Rex astral projects beside her and says, you will see a spectacular apartment. And then he disappears and full body Rex opens the door. He says, Phoebe, I'm so glad you can make it, please. And she goes in and says, wow, he asks, spectacular? And she says, wow, that's exactly the word I was going to use. He tells her that they must be on the same wavelength.
How ironic.
And asks if she wants champagne. Phoebe says no, and Rex says, I insist. And he pours champagne into 2 glasses. Phoebe asks if she's early because she thought they were having a dinner party. And Rex says, I am, with a very exclusive guest list. Just you and me. I don't like that. Please say we're going to be here alone at your apartment.
You got creep vibes?
Yeah. Like, don't say, like, we're on a group date in your house if it's just me and you. That's really suspicious.
It is.
I do not like that. Creepy. Phoebe sits down on the couch, and Rex is saying a toast to your interview. And he hands her the glass, and Phoebe asks, what interview? He says it's at, I don't know, a magazine. It looks like it says Zeitgeist. I don't remember. He says it's with a magazine, and they want to meet with her to perhaps hire her for the fashion section. He asks if she's interested, and she says, very, but what's the catch? And he says, you have to sleep with me.
I thought it was hilarious, to be honest. I really did. Like, I get the creep vibes, obviously, but I thought it was hilarious because she was like, no, sir.
Yeah, she, like, puts down her glass immediately. And, like, he says, what sort of man do you think I am? And they laugh. But, like, the thing is that I think he meant it. I think he was like, let's smash immediately.
I could totally see that too, though.
And he was like, he says, what sort of man do you think I am? I think because of her reaction. Like, if she would have been like, oh, okay, I think he would have done it.
I could totally see that too. But I also thought it was very funny. I don't know. That was just me.
He says, I hope you like sushi. It's imported fresh from Kyoto. Please just make yourself comfortable. And he walks into another room, and then he astral projects himself next to Phoebe. And she's holding a little mirror, checking her makeup. And he says, you're having a premonition of Prue at work. She's in danger. You fear the warlocks after her. You must save her. And then we see Phoebe indeed have this premonition, which means, like, Rex is insanely powerful. If he can make Phoebe have a premonition, that's crazy work.
Yeah.
But he goes back to his body, and as he comes back in the room, Phoebe is standing. She says, I gotta go. I'm really sorry. I can't explain, but I'll call you, okay? Sorry, really sorry. And she leaves. Rex snaps his fingers, and the nice apartment returns to an empty, dark space. He gets out a cell phone, and he calls 911. He says, I'm calling from Buckland's auction house. I think someone's trying to kill me. Please hurry. And then at Buckland's, Prue is walking down the hallway when Jaime comes up behind her. He asks if she's working late and like scares Prue. So he apologizes for scaring her. She says, "It's okay. I guess I'm just a little jumpy lately." He tells her that he doesn't blame her with everything that's going on. And Prue says, "Listen, Jaime, I was wondering, when the tiara was stolen, was there anyone else still here? Like Rex or Hannah, maybe?" And he says, "Nope, you were the last one out, just like tonight. Hardest working woman I've ever met. For what it's worth, Prue, I know you didn't take it. I mean, of all people, there's no way." Prue thanks him and he leaves. She sees Hannah's computer, so she walks into Hannah's office and sits at the desk. She types in Hannah's name and searches for it, and it says no listing. She types Rex's name, and no listing comes up again. And then Rex astral projects beside her and says, "Someone's after you, behind you. You fear it's a warlock with powers greater than yours." Okay. Prue runs out of the office, and we cut to Jaime in the warehouse. We cut back to Prue, and she presses the elevator button when Rex astral projects next to her. He says, "You hear a scream, an innocent to protect in the warehouse." Prue says, "Jaime." And he says, you're to grab the artifact just inside the door. So she runs to the warehouse. Hannah hits Jaime over the head with an artifact, and he falls to the ground. And she throws the security tape and the artifact that she's holding on the ground and walks away. Prue comes in, she picks up the artifact, and then she sees Jaime. So she checks on him as Phoebe runs in. They are kind of shocked to see each other a little bit. And Phoebe says, "Thank God you're all right." And Prue says, "He's dead." Bum, bum, bum. Mm-hmm. In the arms of the angels. Poor Jaime that we just met this one episode. They keep doing that, like introducing people that episode, and they're super important to the plot.
Well, they're guest stars, of course.
Sprinkle the idea of them in, or something.
I get that. I see where you're coming from.
Build the world a little bit. The police are at the Buckland's warehouse. Morris says, "Tape found by the body. Security showing Prue exiting the vault, putting the missing tiara in her briefcase." Prue says, "What? That can't be." Morris says, "I just saw it for myself." Prue turns to Phoebe and says, "Someone must have manipulated me into taking it." And Phoebe suggests that it's the same someone who manipulated her into being a witness against her own sister. And Morris says to Andy, "Any idea what they're talking about?" Andy says, "Not a clue." And Prue asks if Phoebe was with Rex. Phoebe says she was, but she doesn't think this is the time or the place to get into that. Prue says, "No, I just meant, don't you find it a little coincidental that right when you guys start dating, all of this is going on?" Phoebe says, "No, I do not. And besides, I thought you thought Hannah was behind all of this." Prue says she does, and Morris says, "Excuse me, ladies, do you mind if we ask a few questions?" Prue says, "I already told you what happened, okay? I was working late. I heard a noise. I came down and I found Jaime." Andy asks if she knew that he had the tape, and Prue's like, "Of course not. He was dead already. I didn't inspect his corpse."
Yeah.
And Andy says, "So why exactly did you pick up the murder weapon?" Phoebe says, "You think she killed him? Is that it, Andy?"
Like, how did she know that that was the murder weapon?
Yeah.
For one, if he was a really good detective, he would not have disclosed that, by the way.
True.
Because only the killer typically knows what the weapon is.
Yeah. But I also feel like
very obvious. I guess there could have been blood.
Yeah.
But there was no blood. I'm going to throw that out there. There was no blood.
Once again, no blood.
There was not a pool of anything anywhere. They lack the blood.
No blood budget. But I also when Rex said, "You're going to pick up the object right inside the door," I imagined she would walk in, there would be a shelf, and she would pick up whatever object was on the shelf. Not pick an item up off the floor.
Yeah. I was thinking I don't know, a broom or something right around the corner.
Yeah.
Not.
Why would she pick it up off the floor? That makes no sense.
I mean, I guess it could have been the only object there.
Yeah.
But it's a little warehouse. She went into the warehouse area.
Yeah. Phoebe says, "No, I want to know how far he's going with this. And none of this has anything to do with the fact that she dumped you, does it?" Prue says, "Stop that." And Andy says, "Look, we got Prue standing over the dead body of the very security guard who last saw her with the tiara. And Morris tells them the missing security tape is also there, and it shows her taking it. And he says, and holding the murder weapon, which you were there to witness. What are we supposed to think? Prue says, that I'm guilty as hell. Phoebe tells them that they all know that she didn't do this. And Morris asks, who did? Did you see anybody run past you on the way here? Phoebe says no, and Andy says, I'm sorry, Prue. And he calls to Brian and has him arrest her. He says, you're under arrest for suspicion of murder. So Brian puts handcuffs on Prue. In Rex's apartment, Piper and Phoebe walk up to the door. Piper says, we should hire a lawyer. And Phoebe asks, with what money? You know, lawyers aren't free.
They are not. Very few do pro bono. Very few.
Especially for murder.
Yes. And I feel like maybe criminal law is probably more expensive.
I imagine
I don't know.
so.
I mean, my office doesn't do that kind of law.
They
We
don't do
murder. So
it would be very interesting if you did.
it would be. Yes,
You
it would be.
have more interesting stories, I think. Not that you would be able to share them because they're private, but you would have them in your brain.
Yes.
Piper says, I don't know, but we can't just let her sit in jail all night. And Phoebe says that that's why they're here, to get Rex's help. So she rings the doorbell, and then she knocks on the door. She opens it, and it's empty and dark, just like a blank canvas of an apartment. Phoebe says that it's so weird, and Piper asks if they're sure that they're in the right place. Phoebe walks over to the middle of the room, and she picks her lipstick up off the floor and says, this is my lipstick. I'm positive. He couldn't have moved out that fast. It must have been an illusion, all of it, even my premonition. Piper asks how that's possible, and Phoebe says, mind control, astral projection, throwing charms, who knows? Prue is right about Rex, which means I'm dating a warlock. And Piper says, been there, done that.
I love that because Phoebe even like looked offended at that comment. Like, haha, it's finally you, not me.
Yeah. At the police station, Prue is pacing her jail cell, and the guy in the cell next to her is making kissing noises at her. Ugh.
Yeah, not cute.
Prue uses her power and throws him up against the wall.
Rightfully so. Good job, Prue.
As she should. In the station, Morris asks Andy if he wants to talk, and Andy says, I'm just running background checks on all the other employees at the auction house. Morris says that's not what he meant. And Andy says, did you just call me by my first name?
I thought this was so funny.
I wasn't even sure you knew it. Morris says, I heard Prue say it.
I know, right? I just loved that. Like, that was great.
Did not know it.
It was funny.
Andy says, she didn't do it, Morris. And he says, you keep saying that. And he says, it's too pat, too easy. The evidence just keeps falling in our laps. Morris suggests that maybe her sister was right. Maybe his personal feelings are getting in the way. And he says, we've had that conversation. And Morris says, okay, but you have to admit, you stopped seeing Prue for a reason. You thought she was hiding something from you. How do you know she wasn't hiding something like this? And he says, a secret life of crime? I don't think so. You think she was a murderer this whole time? Serial killer?
I mean, I've read books that could definitely turn into that scenario.
Morris asks if there's a better explanation and asks if he wants to book her into county jail. And he says, no, let's just keep her here for as long as we can, at least until the arraignment. At the manor, Piper comes down the stairs and she's holding the tiara. Phoebe asks what she's doing, and Piper says, I'm getting rid of the evidence. They can't bust Prue for murder if they don't have a motive. Phoebe says, okay, mouth. Leo's in the kitchen. And she says, oh, yes? Really? Phoebe tells her to focus and think. She says, the last thing we have to worry about is the legal system. We're up against a warlock now. Piper says, too, if Prue's right about Hannah. Phoebe says, exactly, which means we have to figure out what they want. It can't just be to frame Prue. And Piper suggests that in doing so, they somehow think they can get her powers, because that's what warlocks want. Phoebe says, which means they're trying to divide us, so we don't have the power of 3 to stop them. Piper asks what they're going to do, and Phoebe says, we have no choice. Let's go. And Phoebe hides the tiara in the closet. She walks past the couch, and you see Rex has astral projected into their house and is sitting on the couch. Piper says, go? Go where? Phoebe! Phoebe says it's gonna be all right. And they cut into the police station. Piper and Phoebe are at the back door. Piper says, this is crazy. And Phoebe says, we have to get Prue out before Rex makes his move on us. Piper tells her that they absolutely cannot break Prue out of prison.
I feel like this is definitely a Phoebe moment. Like,
Yes.
this is something she would 100% do. Whereas Piper, who is a very big rule follower, was like nervous the whole time.
Absolutely.
Like, I love how they showed their personalities right there.
Yeah. Phoebe says, we absolutely can. We're witches, and all you have to do is freeze the guards and then unlock Prue's cell. Piper says, me? What about you? And Phoebe says, somebody's got to stay out here in case something goes wrong. Ready? On three. Piper says, no. And Phoebe says, three. And she opens the door.
She does not even count. I loved it.
Yeah. And there's a guard standing there, so Piper freezes him. She walks inside. Phoebe closes the door and says, totally cool power. I hate you.
So my thought is if she freezes the time or freezes, does that also stop the recording coming in and out? Because there's got to be cameras coming in and out of the facility. So that had me questioning, like, how does that aspect of it work?
I don't know. Piper takes the keys from the frozen guard, and Prue asks what she's doing. So Piper unlocks the door and walks over to Prue's cell. Prue asks if she's out of her mind. Piper says, just so we're clear, this was all Phoebe's idea. She unlocks Prue's cell, and she tells Prue that she thinks Rex is a warlock and he's after their powers. Phoebe's waiting outside for you to rub her nose in it. Oh, come on, Prue, before they unfreeze. Prue says, this isn't right. And Piper says, well, neither is the gas chamber. Look, if we're lucky, we'll vanquish them and still get you back here by morning rounds. Prue puts pillows under the blankets on the bed to make it look like she's still there. And she says, that's pretty lame. Prue asks if she has a better idea.
Exactly.
Piper says no, so they leave.
Exactly.
They walk past the guard who's holding a donut, and Prue takes the donut.
Did she?
Yes. And Piper says, don't touch him, don't.
I thought she was putting the keys back.
No, she took his donut.
I'm going to have to rewatch that. That's hilarious.
They run outside, and you see a camera flash. Rex has taken a picture. He says, quite photogenic. I should think the police would find this very interesting, to say the least. So I guess maybe the video footage does freeze as well.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, why would he need to take a picture? They would have it on camera already.
Makes sense.
Interesting. How he would know that, I don't know. But
yeah.
Phoebe says, wait, how did you know that we... And Rex says, what? That you'd be here? Let's just say that I have been watching your every move. Without you knowing it, of course. Prue says, you bastard. And Rex says, don't get too angry, Prue. You wouldn't want to injure me with your power. I'm the only chance you have. While you were here conducting your little prison break, Hannah was retrieving the tiara from your home. You should have gotten rid of it while you had the chance. Personally, I actually thought that was an excellent idea. Phoebe says, astral projection. Oh my gosh. Phoebe says, astral projection. And Prue asks what he wants. Rex says, your powers, of course. That's why I hired you in the first place, to see if you were really the charmed ones. Then I waited to test your strength, see how best to make my move, and here we are. Phoebe asks, why all the drama? Why didn't you just kill us and take their powers? Piper says, don't give him any ideas. Rex says, no. I've seen exactly what you can do when you're confronted directly. That's why I opted for blackmail. See, there's a special spell in the Book of Shadows that strips you of your powers forever. And he shows them the device. It looks like a little lantern. And he says, and this device will capture those powers. Then you'll bring them to me. Prue tells him to go to hell. And Rex says, I'd love to, darling. I miss it terribly. And this will help me return with honors. In return, I'll give you the photo and tell the police I simply misplaced the tiara. No theft, no motive for murder, no prison. You really don't have much time, just until the prison guards realize you've escaped. Well, in the manor living room, they have the Book of Shadows opened up to the spell. Piper says it's a relinquishment spell. If we read it out loud, it takes away all of our powers. Phoebe asks if there's any way to reverse it, and Piper says she doesn't know because it doesn't say. Phoebe says, well, I say we flip to another page and find a spell that kicks Rex's warlock ass. Prue says they can't. Phoebe asks why. And Prue says, for all we know, he's here right now watching us. And if we don't do exactly as he says, he'll tell the police I've escaped. Phoebe says, well, we can't give up our powers without a fight. It's like giving up who we are, who we've become. Piper says, and who we've come from. Phoebe says, exactly. These powers are gifts. Gifts that were given to us to protect and ultimately to pass on to the next generation. Prue says, do you think I don't know that? I mean, how do you think I feel, Phoebe? I'm the one who got us into this situation. Piper tells her that it's not her fault, and Phoebe agrees. And Prue says, yeah, but I'm the one that Rex tricked. I'm the reason we're having this conversation. Phoebe tells them that there has to be a way out of this. And Piper asks, like what? Become fugitives? Something tells me that that's not the best way to go about protecting the innocent. And Phoebe says, yeah, well, we can't protect the innocent if we don't have our powers. And even worse, if we give them up, we'll be giving them up to evil. Prue says, no, we can't let that happen. And Piper says, well, you can't die in jail either. So, besides, with you behind bars, we're to be divided. Rex wins either way. Phoebe says, I don't want to have to do this. And Piper says, neither do I, but we don't have a choice. All we can do is take a leap of faith and hope that it all somehow works out. And we see Leo listening from the other room. In the attic, Prue, Piper, and Phoebe are sitting around the table with the book in the middle, and they're saying a spell. From whence they came, return them now. Vanish the words, vanish our powers. Piper says the same thing and tells Phoebe to do it. And then you hear a chime. It gets really windy, and all the words out of the book disappear into the device.
There is no more Book of Shadows.
Yeah, Phoebe flips through the book. All the pages are blank.
I kind of wished that there would have been like another step of where it like turned to ash or something. You know, because if they don't have their powers, what's the point of having the actual book too? You know what I mean? Like,
to remind them.
I don't know. But then there would be no more episode, but yeah.
Yeah. Phoebe says it was fun while it lasted, and Prue tells them that they need to get this over with. So they cut into Rex's office at Buckland's with Rex and Hannah. Rex says they're coming. Hannah says good. She gets on the floor and turns into a panther. A whole panther.
We officially know that she is not a warlock or witch, but a shapeshifter.
Yes. Or maybe she's a warlock and that's her power. But why a panther? Weird.
Because they're dangerous. Also, did you notice that she always wore black too?
Yeah, true. Yeah, she's a Black Panther, guys.
Mm-hmm.
Rex says, love you too, darling. And then at the police station, Andy's on the computer. He types in Hannah's name, and the photo that comes up is of a black woman. Anna says, why, Hannah? Andy says, why, Hannah, you've changed. Dead 8/20/98. And he types in Rex's name, and an elderly man shows up. Died 8/20/98. He picks up the phone and calls Morris. Says, Morris Trudeau, get your butt over here. I think we figured out who framed Prue. And we cut to Buckland's. Prue, Piper, and Phoebe all walk out of the elevator. Phoebe is saying, okay, I say as soon as we get the photo and the tiara back, we knock the lantern out of Rex's hands and stomp on it. Prue says, what will that do? And Phoebe says, I don't know, free our powers. It's better than doing nothing. Piper asks how they know this isn't just a trap, and Rex comes out of the office and says, you don't, actually. Nevertheless, here you are. Powerless, I presume? Prue asks where Hannah is, and Rex tells her that she is lurking because that's what she does best. He asks for the lantern, and Prue hands it to him and says it all feels a little anticlimactic, don't you think? Too easy, almost. It feels as if we need a more satisfying ending. Prue comes out of the office as a panther. And then we cut into the attic.
You said Prue comes out of the office.
Oh, gosh. Hannah comes out of the office as a panther. And Phoebe says, oh.
Yeah.
And then we cut into the attic. Leo walks in and goes over to the Book of Shadows. He holds his hands over it, and light comes out of them, and all the writing appears back on the pages. Back at Buckland's, their powers start floating out of the lantern. Rex says, no, Hannah, now, quickly. The panther jumps in the air towards the sisters, and Piper freezes it. Phoebe says, wait, we have our powers back? Piper asks how, and Prue says, it doesn't matter. Get out of here, fast. They get out of the way, and Prue moves Rex underneath Hannah. Hannah unfreezes and lands on Rex and starts attacking him, and then turns back into a human. Hannah says, Rex, no. And then she turns to the sisters and says, what have you done? And Rex and Hannah start disappearing. She says, wait, it wasn't my fault. I didn't fail. He did. No, please, no.
The way that she killed him could have been more violent.
Mm-hmm.
Like, she was getting ready to kill the sisters.
Yeah.
Like, let's have some emotion in there and show your hatred to them.
Yeah.
Instead of a little oh, snap your neck.
Yeah.
You know, I wish there was more to it.
Yeah. The two of them burn and disappear. Piper asks what the hell that was. Phoebe says, I think you just answered your own question. Prue says, okay, gotta get me back to jail. Now, let's go. At the police station, Andy and Morris are at the jail cells. Andy tells the guard, we're here to see Prue Halliwell. The guard opens the cell and they walk in. He asks for Prue. Prue is asleep in the bed. So she wakes up and asks what's going on. Andy says, I just thought you'd like to know you're off the hook. Morris says, turns out you were right. Rex and Hannah were setting you up, whoever they were. Prue says she doesn't understand. And Andy says, they think they killed two people, assumed their identities, and took over the auction house. Then they bilked it dry and tried to cap it off with stealing the tiara. Morris says, which we found hidden in his office. Prue asks if they caught them, and Andy says, not yet. I don't suppose you have any idea what this was doing in his office, do you? And Andy shows her the photo that Rex took. She says, quite photogenic. He says, isn't it? And in the manor attic, the sisters are there looking through the Book of Shadows. Piper says, spells, incantations, demon stuff, it's all here. Everything, just like before. Phoebe says, thank God. And Prue asks how. I mean, they didn't reverse the spell. Phoebe says, maybe we screwed it up. It wouldn't be the first time. Prue says, no, we didn't screw it up. Something or someone must have done it. It couldn't have happened on its own. Piper asks, why not? It's magic. And Leo comes in, says, knock, knock. Says the front door was open. I hope it's all right. I left my toolbox. Piper says, that's funny. I don't remember that being there last night. Leo says, well, you know what Freud always said about leaving things. And Piper says, that you secretly wanted to come back for it. And Leo says, guilty. And Prue says, oh, don't use that word.
He looked confused, like, wait, what?
Yeah. Phoebe and Prue walk away, and Piper asks if Leo's leaving. He says, afraid so. She asks if he really has to go. And he says, well, I fixed everything I came here to fix, but I'll be back. I promise. And he kisses Piper as Prue and Phoebe watch and says, nothing can keep me away from you for too long.
Which I like his double meaning right there.
Yeah. He grabs his toolbox and he leaves. And Piper says, well, at least he wasn't a warlock. Phoebe says, well, hey, you don't suppose Leo was the... Prue rips the spell out of the book and as she's talking. And Phoebe goes, what are you doing? Prue says, just getting rid of the relinquish it spell. We got our powers back. I don't want to risk losing them again. Wouldn't there be something on the other side of that page? You also ripped out?
You would think so. Also, all the spells that are in that book are from her ancestors.
Yeah.
So why was that spell in there?
I don't know.
Like, clearly, one of her ancestors had a hard time becoming a witch.
Yeah.
Like, settling into her powers.
Mm-hmm.
If they created it. Because every spell in there, it had been mentioned, was created by an ancestor.
Yeah.
So it's like, why was that even in there? Why did nobody else tear that out?
Right. Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Piper says she seconds that. Phoebe says third. And Prue says, witches forever? Phoebe says, and damn proud of it. Piper lights a match and burns the page. And we cut downstairs. And Leo heads for the door. And as he does, he sparkles out. Mm-hmm. They call that orbing in the show.
So I wonder what he could be.
Interesting. Mm. Yes, I think we'll see very soon, I believe. I'm surprised we haven't seen it already. I thought we would have. But anyway, who is your Witch of the Week?
So I chose Prue because through this episode, I feel like it showed her strength and determination as she navigated the false allegations against her, mm-hmm. And her having to make the decision of giving up her powers, and not just her giving her powers up, but having to kind of convince the other two, mm-hmm. that this is the only way.
Yeah.
And I feel that this episode definitely solidified all three of them accepting who they are and coming into their powers. Like, mm-hmm. they clearly have accepted being witches because they had such a hard time giving up their powers.
Yeah.
Who was your witch?
I also picked Prue, but I kind of had it split a half and half between Prue and Phoebe, because I feel like she had a lot of moments where she was very intelligent in this episode, where she was like, I don't know how he did it. I mean, there's a lot of ways. He could have astral projected. He could have been throwing charms. He could have been but that's him.
Like she was right on the nail.
Yeah. Or like even just going to the apartment to like go talk to him, like, and then realizing things were wrong. She was like, I've been duped. This is unfortunate. And then was immediately like, okay, how do we solve these problems? Let's break Prue out of jail. Let's do that. You know?
Yeah. She kind of took the lead.
Yeah. And was like hiding the tiara and like doing all these things. And I feel like it was very much like you said, up her alley kind of things. But I do think that it was like a lot of moments where she had like a lot of intelligent choices. Yeah. She was funny as usual,
of course,
but I do think she contributed a lot to the positive outcome in the story. And even though she didn't want to give up her powers, and I think it makes sense for her character to be the one least willing to give up her powers,
having more of an issue with it.
Yeah, she still was willing to.
Yeah.
And
I think that just showed how much her sisters mean to her as well, because from the very beginning she was very accepting of her powers. Like she was the one that embraced it from the very beginning.
Right.
So I do agree, her having the hardest time giving her powers up. So I think that was a good point.
Yeah.
That's it for today's episode of Spells and Spoilers. Thanks for hanging out with us. Don't forget to subscribe so that we never miss an episode. And follow us on Instagram at Spells and Spoilers and TikTok at Spells and Spoilers Pod for more. We'll be back next time for more supernatural fun. See you then.
Bye.